So the last step to finish this shirt is to add the buttons. Now adding buttonholes can be a little bit intimidating, but if you just take it one step at a time, you'll be fine. Today I'll be using my fancy electronic buttonholer, but whatever buttonhole attachment your machine came with is fine. The first thing we're going to do is mark the side that the buttonholes need to be on. We're not even going to worry about the buttons at this point. So on my shirts, I like the side that has the pocket to be the side that's on top, so that's where the buttonholes are going to go. So the best thing to do is to mark a straight line across for the top of the buttonhole, and then in between these two sets of stitches, I'm going to mark at the 1/2 inch line, and that's going to be the center of the buttonhole. So I will mark 6 buttons on my shirt. So this is my big fancy buttonhole maker that I bought from Sewing Parts Online. This gets external power, and then it actually plugs into where your foot pedal normally goes. And then this is the foot. So we'll replace that foot with this. So these are the buttons I'll be using. It has this cool little measuring guide. I already have it set because it remembers the last thing I did, but I'll show you real quick. You can go through and set the size of your button, and to set it, you would just hit enter, and then you can go up and down for whatever button size you have. This is how tight you want your stitches together, your zigzags. This is how wide you want your total buttonhole. This is how skinny you want the center where you cut it open. This is to rotate it, how many times you want it to stitch, how many times you want it to do the basting stitch before it stitches the buttonhole, the speed, and then that's just the contrast of the screen. So it looks a lot more complicated than it is. All right, let's get the fabric loaded and stitch out our buttonholes. And don't forget to drop your feed dogs. So here I have my spot marked. You can see the horizontal line and the vertical line, and where they cross, that's where I want my needle to start. Make sure that it goes right where the lines cross. This lever over here lowers this plate, which pinches your fabric into place. And then you can just make sure that your stitches, everything is straight. There's some like grid over here on this clear plastic, so you can judge if your piece is in there straight or not. So we can see that we are all straight on there. Everything looks good. Over here, we'll just hit this button, and that's the go. Press it one more time, and it starts stitching. There's our buttonhole. Now to open up the buttonholes, the way I was taught was to use a really sharp seam ripper. You poke it through and then just kind of use that to cut, and you could put a pin in to prevent yourself from cutting too far. But I recently discovered a buttonhole chisel. It is super sharp, and you just push it straight through, which is really handy. And then I also found out that the new scalpel style seam ripper I just got, she came with a blade specific for cutting open buttonholes. So I'm going to give that a try today. So I like to use a smaller cutting mat so that I'm not damaging my larger cutting mat, because this isn't a rotary blade. And basically, just push it down through. That worked really well. I find with the chisel you have more control, so you don't accidentally slip and slice further than you meant to. All right, all of the buttonholes are open, so now we can focus on attaching the buttons. Now the trick that I like to do, because I use this as my last chance to make sure that my print is all perfectly lined up, is I'll start from the top and work my way down. But for each button, what I'm going to do is line up the print around that buttonhole. So this is my first buttonhole right here. So I'll make sure like all these stars are lined up, her arm is lined up, and then I'll take my marking tool and go straight through that buttonhole up and down a couple times, and then gauge about where the halfway point is and make a crosshair there. So that is where I need to place my button. So I just go one button at a time. I'll sew this one on, leave it buttoned, and then mark this one, this one, this one, and continue on the way down. And if you'd like to see a more in-depth tutorial on how I attach my buttons, I do have it as part of my clothing construction playlist over on YouTube, but I can do one specifically for buttons if you like. Ta-da! All done!